In order to live a fulfilling life, you need to start taking 100% responsibility of your life. Not 99% responsibility, but 100% responsibility. And what does responsibility even mean? Responsibility means being aware of all of the areas that you're victimizing yourself in. A victim is someone who makes excuses for why they fail and not get good results in life. And I used to love victimizing myself a lot, playing this victim game. Constantly listening to Life Sucks playlist on Spotify, watching video after video on how this upcoming generation of Gen Zs, Gen Alphas are completely fucked because of all of the social media and mental bullshit that we have to deal with. And it feels so nice, right? Because it feels like someone actually understands you on a deeper level, like no one else around you, not you can get from your parents or from school in general, but someone out there actually feels like you are them and they are you. But then once this bubble pops and you step back into reality and you head to school, go to bed, eat a meal, did your life actually change? Think about it. Was there any transformation or any change by putting yourself in this negative energy? And most likely, even though there were some kind of change, it's probably you felt way worse than you started. Feels like life is meaningful. You start to hate everyone around you even more because no one understands you, right? So what happens afterwards? You begin to cling onto the source even more. More Spotify, more sad songs, more shitty videos. And you know what happens when you do that? You start to actually believe more and more of this negative energy is part of your reality. And then you lose control of your life. You start attracting these negative energy that you're absorbing. You need to stop being a victim. And you are very clever and very good at creating these excuses and rationalizations in your head. And the biggest excuse of them all is telling yourself that you're not making excuses and that you're not a victim. And you just tell yourself that's how life is. Life is depressing. Life is supposed to be depressing. But then that's not reality. Because in every single situation where you victimize yourself in, you can always flip this mindset around and become empowered. Become a creator in that area of life. You see, what I propose here is that first, you accept that everything that happens in your life is 100% of your responsibility. Even if you're in school, where you feel like you don't belong there because no one has the same passion as you and drive as you, that feeling is your creation. You're doing that in the end. You allowed that to happen. Why? Because if you have taken 100% responsibility for this situation, you would find solutions to fix this problem, and this problem wouldn't even exist in the first place. Now, let's say, for example, I was speaking to another friend, and this friend really likes writing fiction, but then no one else in his school likes writing fiction, so then he drops his passion. Well, if you've taken 100% responsibility, then you would go online and find a writing community, a fiction writing community, and start talking with people there, and start expanding your ideas. Rather than victimizing yourself and saying that, oh man, I can't do this passion because no one else around me has this same drive. It sounds like such a simple fixed solution, but because we're stuck in this victimizing mindset of ourselves, continuously falling into this loop, we don't always see our way out. Notice the word responsibility. If you break the word into two, responsibility, having the ability to respond to situations. And that doesn't mean having control over everything. That just means I'm acknowledging to myself that I'm co-creating every single situation that I am in. I chose to hang out with my friends, knowing that I could be spending more time building my mini project over here. And there's really no right or wrong answer. And maybe you chose this because you need work-life balance. And I mean, we're still a teenager, right? And we should have fun like everyone else. But this also means accepting that you won't be making progress on your project and being aware of the consequences. Because so many people out there are not aware of the consequences, which makes you fall into this repetitive loop of victimizing yourself. And in order to accept these situations, it's very important for us to understand that there's no right or wrong answers with all of these scenarios. And I've faced this so many times in my life when I have to make these hard decisions. But then later on, this process is useful to help you make decisions for your life because it will give you a better picture on what your top values are, or what your higher humanistic aspirations are in life. So then you can use that to help you authentically make you feel fulfilled and choose the right decisions. But then the first step right now is to understand and take 100% responsibility. And taking 100% responsibility means that you can see that you have the choice to do either ways. It's always a duality, right? You have the choice to either hang out with your friends or not hang out with your friends. Everything are polar opposites. We have to understand that. And then, some people might say, oh, but there's peer pressure. There's always peer pressure forcing me to hang out with them. But then again, I tell them that this is your co-creation. Because if you reverse engineer the source of peer pressure, you chose in the beginning to be in this friend group. You chose to hang out with these people. You chose to let them know that you're available during that time. So then once you start seeing that every single experience in your life you're co-creating, then you can start being more responsible and being more accountable with making these decisions. It's the same thing as you choosing right now to listen to this video. Out of everything, you chose to listen to this video and you could be doing something else. So what does that mean? That means you're responsible for that. That means you're responsible for all the information that's entering your mind through my talking. You're responsible for all the thoughts that comes up. You're responsible for what you're going to do with this information, if you're actually going to apply it or use this as another mental masturbation process to make you feel better when you're not applying. And I fell into this trap so many times, and that's why I know. You're responsible for every second of the day, for everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything that you feel, everything that you smell, everything that you touch. For everything that comes into your awareness, you are responsible. And you've got great excuses for why you can't start doing this. Great excuses for all of your childhood traumas and the shit that you're dealing with your parents. Great excuses for not having enough time. Great excuses for relationships that's holding you back. And great excuses for not having enough information, not taking action, not doing anything. Or maybe you think that you're too stupid, you're too lazy, or whatever it is. And I've got these excuses as well. But the big difference is that I don't let these excuses stop me. I don't let it take over me. I face these excuses with my own hands and deal with them. And that's what you got to get good at as well, which is taking 100% responsibility in your life. So how do we deal with these excuses? Let me run you through 3 simple steps. So start listening carefully. The first step is we have to recognize that these excuses exist. And what do I mean by recognize? I mean bringing these excuses to the forefront of your awareness. Now, what does that mean? That means not putting your excuses in the back of your mind, but actually dealing with it right now in this moment, calling it out and admitting it to yourself that you're facing these excuses. Because so many of the time, what happens with these excuses is our mind realizes that this is an excuse, and then we put it in the back of our mind because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to admit it to ourselves because it's shameful and guilty to admit it to ourselves. We don't want to be wrong. But then this is the first step if you want to really release these excuses. So I just want you to go and grab a piece of paper right now and start writing down all of the excuses that you see in your life. And you can start by thinking about today, right? What are the excuses that first pops up into my brain when I think about excuses? What excuses did I make this morning, right? What things am I trying to escape? I think that's a really good question to think about. What did life throw at me today? And especially think about those moments when they were thrown at you, but then you didn't actually want it. Or it was an unexpected thing that came over to you. Maybe you're making some excuses there. And then afterwards, start looking back into the past week and asking yourself the same question. And a trick that I've found is really recalling those moments when you felt emotionally triggered by something, or you felt this sense of guilt for not doing something, or doing something that doesn't feel aligned to you. Most likely you're making some excuses there. So let me give you an example to help you get your mind jogging. So maybe you lied to your friend about a particular topic and you feel guilty for that. So start writing that down. Today I was speaking to this friend about blah 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 topic, and afterwards I felt this in my head. I felt this in my stomach. I knew afterwards that I was lying to them. And thinking back to the root cause, why did I tell them this? Right? Is there something deeper involved in this? Maybe there was something to do with last week when I was speaking to another person. I was trying to gossip about them, or I was trying to hide something from them. Is this authentic to me? Why am I doing this? Am I being fearful of something? Am I trying to hide something from them? And start writing these down and being aware. And then what we'll be able to see with this list is not only your excuses, but in the areas which you're not fully responsible for in life. And then things might actually reveal itself as values that you have from within, but it just might appear in a form that's presented in a way where fear has overtaken this value. So for example, let's just say one of the excuses that you make is not doing your homework or not doing some kind of work. And you start thinking about what you do during that time. And most of the time you realize that you're doing some kind of physical activity, like you're heading to the gym with your friends. So instead of looking at that as an excuse, what you can do is you can realize that probably physical exercise is one of my values. And maybe the problem is not that you're making this excuse, but then the problem is that you don't recognize that that's one of your values. You don't make it part of your routine, which subconsciously your body tells you that you're lacking this. So then it makes this excuse to do the thing that you value and ignore another important aspect of your life, which is completing the schoolwork. So then just start realizing that, right? So feel free to pause the video as I walk you through these steps, so then you can spend more time thinking and writing these down somewhere. So moving on to the second step of this process. After you have this list of excuses, what you would want to do is to categorize these excuses. And categorizing it simply means spreading it into two separate categories. Category A, this is a one-time sort of excuse that happened in the past, meaning that I'm very certain that this excuse will not come up again. So this might be something accidental or something that's not that big that came up, but then somehow you still remember it. So if it is that type of excuse, then categorize as an A. And category B are excuses that you constantly see showing up in your life. And maybe you see yourself making it on a daily basis or a weekly basis, but it's frequently happening, which you've observed. So then label those as B. And in this process, it's very important to be honest with yourself, right? Because there's no meaning for you to be doing these exercises if you're lying to yourself all the time. And it's so important to recognize that we all make excuses, and it's okay to accept that these things happened in the past. So then with these first two steps, I've just showed you the first half of responsibility, which is being aware and accepting these excuses. And now moving on to the third step, and this will be the second half of responsibility. This will be more practical, more hands-on, and we're going to directly deal with these excuses. Now let me show you how. So recalling back to step number 2, You should have labeled these excuses as category A, which are one-time excuses, or category B, which is continuous excuses. And if you haven't done that yet, do go back to that part of the video, because I will be now letting you know what to do with each category. So there's no point of continue watching if you're not going to be doing these exercises. So for situation A, if it's a one-time excuse, then you should learn to accept and move on by forgiving yourself for making this excuse. But then most likely, because you remember these excuses, even though they're one time, it probably means that there's something in these excuses that are bugging you, and it's more than just a one-time excuse. So what I want you to do is notice with all of these excuses that you've wrote down, are there any recurring patterns that you see? Is there something deeper with these excuses which makes you remember it so well? And maybe it happens in a particular time of the day. For example, if all these excuses that you're making, the one-time excuses, happen in the morning, maybe it's something to do with your morning routine or your sleep, right? Or maybe it's happening in a particular place, or when you're doing a particular thing. Right? So just start noticing these patterns if there's any interesting things that you smell with these excuses. So what you want to do is treat yourself like a detective of your life, right? You smell that there's something fishy going on. You got the puzzle pieces of your excuses and you're trying to figure out what's actually happening there. And most of the time, what you'll find out with these recurring excuses when you dig deep enough is that there's actually some real source of problem in there, and it's tied to like a specific event or belief that was instilled during your childhood. And it might sound like such a minor thing, like maybe somehow you remember the time when your mother yelled at you when you were 6 years old for dropping a piece of macaroni on the floor. And it seems like such a small event, but then somehow you remember it, and it's something really personal to you. So if any of these situations come up, write them down so then you don't forget about them, since they can be significant clues to the excuses that you're making in your life. Because, you see, if you hold on to this voice of your mother screaming in your head for more than 10 years in your life, what do you think will happen to your subconscious mind? Your subconscious mind was still very fresh and young, trying to grapple through what's going on during your childhood and trying to grow up. And what might happen is your mind might start suppressing you with this fear of doing something wrong because it remembers that your mother yelled at you. Or even worse, you completely become nervous around the girls in your school because your body fears that they will be as judgmental and in the same way as your mother when you were young. Even though you know that in your mind consciously that it's not true. And then what's wrong with that? What will happen when your subconscious mind, your natural body, is not aligned with your conscious mind, which is your actual thoughts? What's wrong is that these events start to shape your worldview and how you behave and interact with certain situations. So for example, the reason why I can recall this so deeply is because I faced this myself. I didn't talk to the girls in the past because my body would tense up whenever I tried to do so, or whenever I tried to approach them. It felt like my body would just suddenly shut off and I was nervous. And for the greatest time, I thought it was something to do with me making excuses. There was a problem with me. But then once I realized that, my brain unconsciously reminded me of this false belief, right? The false belief that they are going to be judging me all the time. And once I realized that that was rooted from my childhood relationships with my mother, then I can start accepting this, and then I can start realizing that I'm not the problem and I can stop victimizing myself. And this sounds like such a crazy thing, but then so many of us face this and transfer these emotional baggages to other people because we don't recognize that we're actually perfect people. We're actually already fine beings. But then we're just victimizing ourselves in these fear and in these traumas that other people have spread to us. So we need to liberate from them if we want to really live a fulfilled and aligned life. You have enormous creative power in your disposal. You could solve almost any problems and any challenge that's in front of you. And if you can't solve it, you can always find a way to cope with it, to manage it, to minimize the harms with it, and even enjoy it. That's an option for you. And it really comes down to how you approach these excuses. Are you going to approach them in a way where you victimize yourself? Or are you going to approach them and accept them by finding out the root sources? You have the creative potential inside of you to create artworks, books, businesses, and lifestyles that you dream of. But then this potential needs to be realized. And in order to do so, you need to take 100% responsibility. You know, here's a story. For me personally, it's really sad when I look around to all of my classmates in school, especially the people that I knew from primary school and still classmates with me right now. One of the things I notice is that they have these artistic abilities and these talents. I know that they can accomplish big things in life if they follow these talents. And you could probably relate to that as well. You can see so many people around you with these talents of, no matter if it's drawing, to maybe singing. And what they think with these talents is that these are just hobbies. They don't take them actually seriously. They don't expand on them. On the side with me right now, I want to actually share with you a poster that my friend made for me back when I'm in primary school. You can see this on the camera. You can see this poster is really well drawn, right? Like, imagine a 13-year-old drawing this blindly from the spot without any visuals, just using their imagination. And what I literally told them was, I'm hosting a table tennis competition. Can you draw me a poster to promote it? And then after 30 minutes, this is what they came up with. Look how beautiful it is, with all the shadows and everything. So the reason why I brought up that poster is because the last time that I spoke with this friend of mine, he was telling me how stressful school was and how he's locked in into pursuing a traditional profession that his parents wants. And at that moment, I just felt disappointed. And on the side, I also asked him whether or not he was still pursuing this hobby of drawing, whether or not he drew every single day. But he said that he just can't. He just can't because all the school and all the stress that he has. The stress of applying to universities and everything. And he saw no meaning with it anymore. He saw no meaning with pursuing his creative zone of genius to do things that fulfill him because of this fear, of these excuses that he's making. And it's really unfortunate, right? Like, most people don't take the first step to really level up these passions because they don't believe that they can. They doom themselves right in the beginning. They say things like, well, I can't make a career with this. I can't make this a masterclass. I always struggle with this, we'll struggle with that. This problem's going to come up, and that problem's going to come up. I can't do this with this situation. I got school, and blah, blah, blah. But then if you think that way, then of course that's going to be true for you. Victims live a miserable life. They don't have passion. They don't have freedom. They don't have lots of fun. They don't have peace of mind. They don't have fulfillment. They don't have impact on the world in a powerful and positive way. So in this sense, now you recognize that you have a choice. What game are you going to play? Are you going to continue being the victim? or actually going to think, you know what? Why don't I take more responsibility today? Starting with just this one thing. And it doesn't have to be something big and scary, but something small. For example, your diet. What types of information you're consuming. What you're going to do after this video. Something as small as that. And just by doing that, you're already freeing yourself from all of these excuses that you're making and doing your higher self a favor. For those who really want to take this seriously, or who wants to actually test this out, I've created a full worksheet to help run through all of the different processes that we've explained in this video. And the link for this worksheet, the digital copy, will be in the description. So if you want, feel free to print it out, or you can also type it. And this is going to be a printed copy. I put it in one piece of paper. And you can see there are 3 steps. First step is going to be recognizing, right? Recognizing what these excuses are in your life. And then afterwards, you categorize them in A or B. So what you would do is you would go back up to step 1 and then figure out whether this is a one-time excuse or continuous excuse, and you would just in brackets put A or B. I've just given you some examples here just in case you get stuck as well. So feel free to delete that when you're putting your own inputs and reflecting and journaling on this. And then step 3 is going to be evolving. So there's 3 different steps to evolving and really releasing these excuses and taking action from it. The first step is going to be investigation, so being a detective and finding recurring patterns. And then the solution, what can you do about this? Coming up with 3 specific and tangible actions that you can take. And what do I mean by specific and tangible? This means not doing something fluffy and something general. For example, I could do more physical exercise. That is so broad and so general, right? What specific means is answering the 5 W's, because only after you answer the 5 W's will you actually even do this thing. Because if you have such a broad thing, your mind's just going to slack off because you don't have an actual plan. Like if you think about all of the school assignments or any single project that you do, why do you achieve them? It's because you set yourself deadlines. You set yourself a specific time to do a specific thing. So then the more specific you can go with your action, the more likelihood you're going to release these excuses, right? So now I've listed out some examples here. If you want to see how in depth I go, feel free to go even more in depth. And then finally, we need to accept these excuses. And this is what many people miss as well. Accepting these excuses will help us not fall into the negative loop. So what you will want to do is just verbally recall, I accept that I made this mistake in the past. I acknowledge that humans are not perfect and everyone makes mistakes. Therefore, I forgive myself and move on. But then you don't have to verbally do this, right? What you can do instead is when you find yourself falling into this negative loop after you make an excuse, the best thing to do is to say this in your head, to accept that you're making these excuses, because most likely what you'll find your subconscious self doing is you're still stuck in this guilt and this shame of making these excuses. That's why it's so important to have this affirmation to tell yourself that it's okay to make mistakes and to move on from it, rather than being stuck in the past, which makes you go into this whole negative rabbit loop and makes you not make progress in life. You know, life is short, so why are you stuck in these things that do not progress you forward in life? So what you can do is be even more specific with the verbal recall and create a revamped version specifically for the excuse that you list out here. So I gave you another example here. So feel free to do whatever you want with it, play with the colors, play with the emojis, and yeah, make this something to journal on, to do in your free time, right? Rather than being stuck in these loops, because one of the big problems that a lot of teenagers face is, not being just aware of these things. And these things really control your life, right? That's why it's so important to take action. I believe that everyone needs to be having one of these sheets and at least going through this mental process, so then you don't get stuck in depression and everything. So that's going to be that. In this next video, I'll be guiding you through a visualization exercise that's been super helpful for me to release these traumatic experiences that I had in the past. And hopefully it will also help you open your mind as well and see things in a complete different way. Because at the end of the day, every single situation has its duality, right? Everything has a positive side, everything has a negative side. And what we need to do in this world, in this society right now, is stop seeing things in such a negative lens. And if you think about where this negative lens is coming from, it's coming from everywhere. All of the information you're consuming, news outlets, people around you being fearful of doing this and being fearful of doing that, asking what if questions. What happens at the end is that you overthink these things. You develop anxiety, right? You don't need pills. You don't need these programs. You don't need these, random stuff to help you make these anxiety go away. What you just need to do is be aware of these anxiety and resolve it internally. There's nothing external that can help you resolve these anxiety. And what it will actually do is it will just make you fall into the deeper loop, because I've tried this myself before and I've seen so many people do the same thing, and this is what they end up in the end. So what we need to do is start looking inwards, start having 100% responsibility, so then we can liberate ourselves from these excuses and start living a fulfilled life. Catch you guys in the next one.